Hi everyone. So what I want to talk about in this section is how do your life goals, your aspirations and your priorities, how do they relate with political and social activism? If they actually. Yep. So over here is firstly data analysis, like what we got from our questionnaire in three main areas: educational aspirations, career, and life priorities. I'll explain further on what these mean later on. So after that, I would also introduce some theories that could possibly explain these trends and the criticisms that come with that. Criticisms that would limit their effectiveness as explanations for what we found. And lastly, I'll conclude. So what do we mean by educational aspirations? In our questionnaire, we specifically asked whether, like, how far they want to go in their education, whether they want just a bachelor's or they even want a master's or doctorate degree. Well, you can see that it's very specific in our questionnaire, but that's because all of the people that we surveyed were currently undertaking undergraduate, so the bachelor's degree was like the bare minimum. So as you can see, as likelihood of joining protests increases, like the moment you reach the likely group, there are no more bachelor's degrees that the people aspire to. People want either a master's or doctorate. And when you reach very likely, all of them want a doctorate degree. But what we can see is very obviously, the more likely one is to join a protest, the higher your educational aspirations. And from the chart we saw earlier, it was very obvious and it's quite scary. So why? Well, we can possibly infer from the trend that we got that the value that people impart on high political involvement is somehow transferable to higher education. Well, now let's think further. Why is that so? I can come up with 4 possibilities of why this is so. Number 1, higher education enables one to make even more useful, more productive political contributions, and hence people partake in education for the ends of political participation. Number 2, somehow being involved in politics motivates you to further your education. Number 3, somehow higher education and political participation are rooted in the same thing. Maybe the same desire, or maybe it's the same characteristic in your personality. Number 4, people with higher educational aspirations are in fact the ones that are more educated, and actually it's educational background that selects for political activeness. Okay, so the first one, that education enables us to make better political contributions. Well, this actually presupposes that we want to be politically active more so than to be educated, doesn't it? Because the ends seem to be useful political contributions instead of education. Education is a mere means of that. However, this doesn't seem to be true at all, especially in the UK, as we can see from the survey results that we've got here. In the general election in 2001, we got the lowest turnout rate ever, and amongst that, the youths appear to be a really, really big proportion of that. I mean, only 39% of 18 to 24-year-olds voted, and that's really little. And if we can consider voting as the basic, like bare minimum form of political participation, then if we aren't even willing to do that, then would we do even more? So it seems like this hypothesis doesn't really seem to be valid. Also, most political contributions really don't require that high a level of education. Like, you don't need a doctorate degree in order to be politically active. Yeah, so we kind of agreed that the first one doesn't seem to hold that true, and then now let's explore the second one, which is a high level of political involvement incentivizes us towards education. Yeah, maybe this is because, like, when you are involved politically, you better understand that issues are that complex, so you realize that actually I don't know enough yet, like I still need to go further in my education. Or second, you by being so involved in political issues, you appreciate your opportunities to study, and hence you want to further your education. However, all these, they don't seem convincing enough, and actually it doesn't really hold true, because some surveys have shown that the reasons that the students give for entering higher education is really job related. For example, like having a master's degree is more likely to get you a better job in the future. So if the main reason people enter higher education is actually like job related, then it doesn't seem like these two issues here are big enough or significant enough. Okay, the third one, which is rooted in the same origin. Well, okay, students who choose higher education generally would make the value judgment on education that it would, number one, realize their potential, and number two, develop their existing skills. And this seems to be a reason for them to choose higher education. Well, in the same way, people protest to see change. So, and I think a lot of times these changes, they desire these changes so that the systems will allow them to flourish, so that the systems that they're in will be beneficial instead of restrictive. So there seems to be a similarity here, that they want these things for the same reasons. And perhaps also, both these things require people who are determined enough to take action. So here we're looking at the same characteristic that both of these things select for. Well, the fourth explanation could possibly be that actually it's not the aspirations that is the cause, but aspirations are like people who desire higher aspirations are actually people who are more educated, and actually it's education that selects for activity. Well, first let's break into two parts. The first part is whether or not having higher educational aspirations really are coming from the people who are more educated. And it's possible, because when you're more educated, you understand your options better. You understand that, like, in order to get a better job, you need to have better achievements, for example. And also, when you're better educated, you develop the higher self-esteem, the confidence that you actually can go further, you actually can achieve a master's. So it seems like this link can be sort of established. But how about the second? Well, education is actually, like, the second link that we need to establish is that education has a positive effect on political activeness. And it's so true. In so many documents, so many surveys, so many studies, we find that education is the most important, number one characteristic of a politically active citizen. Well, why is this so? I mean, there are so many reasons, but like one reason possibly is that education gives you the skills so you can understand politics, understand the regimes, understand what's democracy, understand your role in it, and understand even your rights, your political rights. Number two, being more educated gives you access to information, so you can actually research, you actually understand what people are fighting for, you understand what's the situation now, and you understand what you can do about it. Number three, it imparts the value of civic engagement. The very lifestyle, or the very value of being engaged in it, of democracy, is something that comes with education. Yep. So it seems that this is possible, like that this indirect effect on political activeness is somehow valid. Well, the limitations of this whole, the trends that I've laid out so far is, number one, sample pool has been a bit biased. We've been asking our friends, and our friends are all undertaking undergraduate studies right now at the London University. So, the pool is already quite small. But having said that, we can, with our limited research study here, we can kind of conclude that higher educational aspirations is related to political participation, because there are similar origins, like there are similar aims involved, there are similar characteristics of personalities that would want these things. But somehow also it's very hard to separate the effects of existing education. Like I said just now, maybe it's an indirect relationship, and if it's an indirect thing, then that's not what we really want, because I want to know whether your aspirations are related to your participation, not your educational background. Okay, so now we go on to career. Well, what? Okay, so the question we asked is whether what's important to you in your career, and we gave them only 5 options to choose from: positive change society, social working environment, meaning whether there's office politics or whether or not it's a very friendly, very amicable environment to work in, career progression, prestige, and salary. So in this graph we see, as likelihood of joining a protest increases, we have 3 main trends that we can see over here. The first one in salary, career progression, and then positive change. So the more likely one is to join a protest, the less important salary is, but the more important positive change to society and career progression is. No, so what does this say? Well, we can kind of go further and infer that if you say that salary is less important to you, then it kind of means that you place a smaller value on material achievement, that wealth, that material things somehow are less important to you. That's the first thing we can gather. The second one is you place a larger value on societal issues. And the third one, you place a large value on improvement. Well, we inferred this because of the importance of career progression. And I mean, if we think about it, if salary is not important, but career progression is, then what does this say? It means it's not the money that comes with progression, but it's something else. And it's possibly the sense of achievement, sense of self-improvement. So this is what we gather from career aspirations, and now we move on to life priorities. So the question we asked in our questionnaire is, what are the life priorities that are important to you? And we asked them to list 3. So here I have a chart that shows you how many % of people who say that who are likely, unlikely, or like very likely or very unlikely to join a protest, what they said was important to them. So as likelihood increases, we see quite a few trends actually, and this shows the increases or decreases. So the more likely one is to protest. And I have a table here that shows you what increases and what decreases in importance. So what increases in importance is achieving personal goals, making a difference to society, being a good person to those around me, and pursuing hobbies. Somehow, what became less important in life priorities is wealth, providing a comfortable life for your family, and healthy family relationships. So, I mean, what's worthy for us to do now is to group these things and to see if we can find a common trend around here. Well, first, wealth and comfortable life for your family. It speaks of material things, whether or not material things are important to you, and it seems like it isn't. Like, the more likely you are to protest, the less likely material things are important to you. And then we look over here. Somehow these things over here, these factors seem to be similar in the sense that they're more reflexive, that it involves more moral judgments at play. So we will then extrapolate what we created from there, and so we kind of gathered 3 different things. Number 1, prioritizing immaterial things. Like we said just now, money, wealth became less important, and other things like being good and achieving my goals are more important. So, the first conclusion we can get is that prioritizing immaterial things seem to be a selective factor for political activism. Secondly, is self-reflection. Have I been good to other people? Have I achieved my own goals? And the third one is making moral judgments. Have I been good, basically? And to show in another graph we gathered from there is how does volunteering relate to the priority that you put on society targeted acts? Society targeted acts basically means things that are not about yourself. It's about how important to you is, like, for example, making a difference in society or being good in society. Yeah, so I mean, as the number of priorities on society targeted acts increases, we see very, very obviously the volunteering frequency increases. So there is a very strongly direct relationship between volunteering and the priority put on these acts. And what does it show? It just means that the action reflects your reported importance of, because priority put on society targeted acts, it only tells us what they think is important. But when we ask for volunteering frequency, we ask how often do you do it. So basically this graph shows us that that your action reflects what you told us, that other people and society is more important to you. Now, what are some theories that could possibly explain the trends that we found? Well, one of them is Reed Shapiro and Winter's study on political participation and quality of life. What they said, okay, basically their theory is based on Sen's book on freedoms. And as this quote says, Sen believes that political participation is actually a very basic freedom that people want, that people will value, because they are able to do something for themselves. They have a freedom, they have the autonomy, they have independence. And on top of Sen's theory of freedoms, they also believe in this thing called procedural utility. Basically that people are satisfied not just based on the end result, but in the processes in which the ends have been achieved. So the means, like the means are sufficient to like satisfy you. So based on these two things, they theorize that political participation increases your utility through three things. Number one, autonomy. Basically, by voting or by being able to protest, you have the space to make your own decisions. Number two, relatedness and sense of belonging. Like the very fact that you have the opportunity to do these things means that you can feel related to a group of people. You have an identity with a group of people, with a nation in which you protest. A government as well. And thirdly, it means that you have the knowledge to be competent. It increases your self-esteem, because like the very fact that you're involved means that you know so many more things. You know how to help yourself, you know what are the strategies involved, and this increases your competence and your self-esteem. Yeah. Also, then a second theory is that political participation is related to happiness, and there are many studies that have proven this, and here I only listed 3 different ones, but the research on this seems quite extensive, that being politically participative and active somehow increases your well-being and happiness. Now, after looking at all these things, then could it be that people subconsciously or like somehow incorporate political activism into their life priorities because it increases like your life satisfaction, because it makes you happier, because it increases your well-being, and hence somehow it's inserted into one of my life aspirations, like perhaps in an indirect means, but it's still somewhere there. Is this possibly the reason? Well, maybe, but there are several criticisms to this. Number one, there could be the case of inverse causality, meaning what if in fact it is happiness that would increase your political participation? It's not participation that increases happiness, but the other way around. Well then, I could then agree against this. Not against, but this could somehow work well for me as well, because if it's happiness that increases participation, then I could say that things like self-reflection or like education aspirations, they actually increase my happiness, and in turn the increase in happiness will increase my political participation. So there's indirect effect here, but it's still an effect, right? Is this possible? Oh, I mean, a second criticism is that um, the opportunity for political action is more than enough, and I don't have to take real action. So it doesn't really explain being going out there and protesting. It just explains that as long as the regime is democratic and I have the space to do it, it's enough. So it doesn't explain the trends that we find. Thirdly, the means of participation is actually important. Voting just is, I mean, voting is participation, but I mean, a lot in our questionnaire we study a lot on protesting or striking, and these are more active forms. So would the result be different? So the conclusion we've gathered is that political activism appears to select for people who aspire towards higher education, jobs with career progression, jobs which benefit society, being good to others, achieving your personal goals, and lifestyles that benefit society, as well as pursuing your hobbies. Well, let's kind of group these things together to get like broader inferences. Now, we see that self-improvement seems to be a big trend here. Sense of others above self, which would explain the factors that benefit other people, benefit society. Morally good lifestyles, having a moral judgment. And these things kind of group together to say immaterial lifestyles. The people who prefer immaterial things somehow would be more political active. And lastly, self-reflection. So, I mean, in this little segment, I've showed you that there are some factors that seem to relate to political activism, and these are, let's say, more immaterial things. And yeah, so look at the other sections to see what the relationship between political activism and other parts of your life are. Thank you.